Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Frank Pisani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm looking forward to chatting with y'all.
Excellent. And Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, nerds?
What is going on? It's been so long since I've seen you. Cam and I went and saw Dune yesterday, which will be a topic of conversation as we will dive into our spoiler-free and spoiler-filled impressions of Dune today. We're also going to be covering Far Cry 6, which Frank sat down and finished. And then Cameron has some additional Back 4 Blood thoughts that we will discuss on today's episode. But before we dive into any of that, a little bit of housekeeping for you. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like Plankfan did this last week. It's been so long since I had to remember to shout out a new Patreon supporter. Thank you, Plankfan, for hopping in and giving us a little bit of support this month. I basically had to dust off that part of the doc to remember to add his name in this week. So yeah, with that housekeeping with that homekeeping out of the way, because that's the phrase, let's talk a little bit first about Far Cry 6, Frank. So you finished up, you said. Is that I'm guessing that's not 100%ing it, but what were your Far Cry thoughts?
Yeah. So I did just finish sort of the main story, and I did a bunch of side stuff, but I don't have the platinum, and I'm probably not going to go for it in this one, which we can talk about in a little bit too.
Mm-hmm.
But overall, with the actual game itself, I had a really good time, and I really liked it, and I definitely recommend it for everybody out there who has enjoyed past entries in the series, or even if you just wanted to check it out, because I definitely think this is a highlight for the series. But I've also been of the opinion where they kind of keep getting better and better as they kind of iterate and refine some of these things, because it really is that classic Far Cry formula, but there's just a ton of quality of life improvements that have been put on it, which just make the game even better to kind of go around and play. One of the biggest things I like that they've added is you now kind of have your entire arsenal with you at all times.
Mm-hmm.
You can just go into the pause menu and you can change out what is in your weapon wheel at literally any time. So that really does help you in a lot of scenarios because you get this gigantic arsenal, but you can carry 3 guns with you and a sidearm and a couple throwables. And then now you have this backpack called the Supremo, which is usually pretty good too. But I like having the entire arsenal of everything with you for the entire adventure. And also they made they kind of kept some of those RPG elements from New Dawn, but they've taken it a little bit back where nothing's numbered, but all the gear does have effects on what it does for you, and either increases your defense, or some of the gear you can wear now, instead of just being cosmetic, it gives you perks that would have been in the last game. There's no skill tree anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wear this mask, it'll let you do machete kills on alerted enemies. So there's so some of the things that used to be perks in a skill tree are now just specific items you can wear, which I kind of like the idea of, but I don't love in practice, because I miss things I used to be able to just do that I just can't do anymore. Or I have to go into a menu, equip an item, do it, and then just go back to whatever I was doing before, because specifically sabotaging alarms, you have to wear an item to do that. So it's if you can disable them, you can just blow it up and turn it off. But if you want to sabotage it, so when they go to activate it, it blows up and it kills them, you have to wear a wristband that lets you do that. And so it's a thing of I totally found myself going into a base and then having to equip that, sabotaging, and then changing back to whatever I had before that gave me a different ability or a defense bonus. So that's one thing I didn't love about it, but you can change at literally any time. You can just swap it and do that. But I hated you don't want to go into the pause menu every 5 minutes to have to mess with stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the big the kind of the big criticism I had seen about the game going around, is that it's certainly more flexible, but you end up having to do a lot of inventory management in the middle of a fight, or in the middle of a in an action sequence or something like that. And I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you're playing this entire thing through single player. When you don't have that pause option in a co-op setting, I imagine it would be even more frustrating on the co-op side of things as well. So yeah, that's I think that's a weird step, and I hope for the sake of that series, I hope they find a happy medium of hey, these are the things that should be attached to a skill tree, and these are the things that should actually be perks that you can that are on the equipped weapons. Because I heard the same thing of like, certain enemies now require, like, you need to have like certain weapon types to take out certain enemies now. And so
Yeah.
if you're having to like switch and you didn't have like that gun equipped at the beginning of the battle, you got to go into the pause menu, switch to that gun, use it for that one enemy, and then switch back to the gun you were using, or the gun you'd rather be using, or something like that. So yeah, that seems needlessly tedious and frustrating. So I don't like when decisions like that happen. I'm like, who at the studio like really got behind those kinds of things
Yeah.
that were like, yeah, this is something we're going to really think players enjoy, versus the people who are like, maybe that's not the best approach, maybe that's not the most like friendly for the end player, but whatever.
This game has a couple things that kind of make me think that, especially because there's even cockfighting, and that was one where like I did it, I got the trophy, but then like it's like a Tekken kind of like fighting game it puts you into almost. But I was like, how? Why is this here? Like, like somebody had to pitch this.
Yeah.
So many people had to develop this and like QA it and work on it, and it's just a side thing you never have to interact with. But I was like, I can't believe this made it through like any phase of development.
Yeah.
Let alone is like in the actual game, where it is like a little bit violent too, where I was like, damn, I don't want to interact with this, where I
Yeah.
was like,
I mean, that's definitely another one of those things that speaks to like Ubisoft just doesn't have the best, like, for as much as like all of their games say like this game was made by a team of culturally diverse people, like they just have almost zero like street smarts and common sense when it comes to those kinds of things. Like they had to know cockfighting was going to like blow
yeah,
up and be like, why is this in the game? This is like a horrific stereotype. And sure, it is still legal in those parts of the world, but you don't need to like glorify that and under like, I don't understand that. Cam, you were gonna jump in?
Yeah, I was. God, like there's so. This is the exact fear that I had about Far Cry 6 after Far Cry 5. Like, there's just such a lack of willingness to actually get into the material and the actual, like, issues and problems of a setting. Whether it was, Wyoming,
Montana.
Montana, yeah. Wyoming is the same kind of thing, like that north central American, north central U.S., like United States of America, not Central American. But this idea of Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, like deep rural America in these like in the Western United States, and kind of like this culture of God, guns, and country and whatnot in a very real, visceral way, and really just like, and getting into like American cults and the like in the Western United States, and like that kind of like phenomena that exists in the Western United States with these cults that have existed for like several different versions of essentially the same structural organizations in the whether it's Children of God, or the like, there's just so many numerous examples of what they could have dived into, and instead they just like skimmed the surface on all of them and just like didn't dive into any of that. And then to see them now take on essentially Cuba, like essentially Cuban revolution, and this idea of Central American island nation, history of violence and revolution, and once again just like skimming the surface of that, to the point where like they literally put in an actual cockfighting simulation minigame, and it's like like Ubisoft, like you said, Ubisoft always talks about all the resources they spend on cultural exploration and identification, and wanting to like explore this like fictitious culture, and then they they just skim that surface of it. It's the same, like, can you confirm, like, Frank, I've heard from other people, can you confirm that there's, like, weird Spanglish in this, where it's, like, I think one of the most famous ones is, Juan Carlos Esposito's character, literally says,
Just let me jump in. Giancarlo Esposito, not Juan.
Oh, sorry.
That's there's a whole other aspect of that of
oh yeah,
an Italian actor playing a Yaran dictator or whatever.
Yeah, ethnically Italian. Like I think he's from Amsterdam, like from the Netherlands. Also, like the very European actor playing this dictator, because once upon a time he played a role on Breaking Bad that defined his career. It's just so emblematic of the problems of this series that it's gotten into. Far Cry that started really kind of touching on things in Far Cry 4. Like Far Cry 1 through 3 was always this idea that this is a fictitious island that you're going to, and it's about the idea of of quote unquote civilization meeting the wild. That's the point of that's the origin of the Far Cry series, which in of itself has origins and problems within imperialism and other aspects of that are just on its own as far as issues go. So there's a whole thing about it, but it's always been kind of I think Far Cry 2 is the island of Dr. Moreau type, experimental, human experimental stuff, kind of inspiration. Far Cry 3 was definitely about, what do you do when you take a bunch of privileged white kids from California and throw them into a real fucking scary situation. Which is why Far Cry 3 one of my opinions, one of the best games they've ever made. Because you just throw it's about a kid who honestly I really love the story of Far Cry 3 because it's literally just about a guy getting lost and caught up in his journey to rescue his friends and indulging and engaging in in drugs and lots of leftover stuff from the Vietnam era of concepts and ideals, and it's a very cool exploration of a kind of approach to the legacy of imperialism and European exploration in these areas, to the point where I won't get into spoilers about that game because I still think it has some really great twists and turns to it. But it's phenomenal. And then Far Cry 4 is just such a massive departure from that to being essentially the template that we see going forward now.
So I want to redirect the conversation back to 6 rather than
6. I got way too deep.
You went down your Cameron rabbit hole. And before I interrupted you on the Giancarlo versus Juan Carlo, you were asking if it kind of features broken Spanglish stuff.
Yeah,
Frank?
one of the
is that an element that's in there, Frank? Yeah. Noticeable?
Yeah. I would definitely say so, and I mean, and it didn't I know I'm not the expert on it, and so but I definitely would say that's kind of in there, and I didn't necessarily ruin the experience for me, but I could definitely see that argument being made that that could have been handled better, or even done better than it is. But I thought for what they did, I thought they kind of handled a lot of the world building and a lot of those elements pretty well, and I also thought I don't think they go all the way in, but I thought they did a better job of tackling some of the things around Castillo and the things he's doing, and just those kind of real world elements, we're kind of what Cam's point there, where in Far Cry 5 with Montana, he's they kind of skim the surface, and in this I think they go deeper, but I don't think they go deep enough. I would have wanted them to go even deeper, but I do like that they went deeper. And you also get more of Castillo just in the game. It's not that thing that we've seen before where he's just there in the beginning and then he disappears and he shows up at the end. It's he is a constant figure, constantly there, even if what I liked is you don't have to be there interacting with him, but they just give you scenes that he is in, that he's quietly terrifying in, and you get to see other people be terrified around him, and just to be around him, and you could even see his reactions to the things you're doing, where like he gets a phone call, or like he's at somebody's funeral, or like he's doing an interview and they ask him about like, hey, so this happened recently, how do you feel about that? Like I really liked like a lot of those like elements to it.
Okay, so he's much more, present. He's much more of a presence in this game compared to maybe past Far Cry villains. That's good to hear.
And there's more of and to Cam's other point, there's more of kind of that thing shown on like some of the things he's done or he's doing. And I feel like they even try to show like his own justification for it, where he's like, I'm trying to build Yara into this like perfect thing. But it's like, well, yeah, but you're a dictator and you have slave labor and all this other, you're poisoning them in the fields with your fertilizer, like all this stuff. Like, but I thought they did a good job of trying to like highlight some of the things that like why he is the way he is, and then like what he's doing. And they even make a lot of callbacks to the revolution in '67, which is where the revolutionaries actually kind of won momentarily, and they took out his father, who was the president. And so there's a lot of like interesting things there where he talks to his son and he goes, Diego, I was 13 when they came for my dad. Like, and it's like that whole like, interesting kind of setup. Like I really like the relationship between him and his son too, because his son's also like a prominent figure.
Okay. And how's that, I guess, that character in the game? Because yeah, like I've got the image I have up for this on the video version is the two of them kind of in father and son, and I saw somebody posting that the son is played by the kid who was in Coco. So how was, I guess, how is their relationship? How does Diego play into it? Because I haven't seen a ton about him apart from I think like one of the opening cutscenes is basically like he's on a boat and like because he tried to get away, Giancarlo Esposito's character just kind of like fucks up that boat and kills everybody on board.
Yeah, no, and that is like the opening scene and kind of the premise for the game. And I really liked the relationship between him and Diego, and I think that's actually like a really big main focus of the game. Is just like that's where you get so much like exposition, and so you learn so many things about him and his family and why he's doing these things is because he's like talking to Diego. And then even Diego with like that guy, it makes sense it's the kid from Coco because he does a really good job too of just his acting and one of the things that he does. And like he is like such a turmoiled child and he's so like caught in the middle of all this. And like I really like those like elements. And again, though, I do wish they could have dove a little bit deeper and spent more time with it, especially because by the time you get to the end, I won't spoil it, but I felt like it just wraps up. It's like, okay, you're done. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like I was like, I would have loved even more time with these characters and even see more of this turmoil that I really liked. But then, the game has to end at some point. But I felt like it was a little bit rushed. I feel like it's slow in the beginning and it's rushed at the end, which is weird. But then but like they do so much right between the relationship between them that I actually thought that it was. I think this has one of the better stories that like a Far Cry has tried to tell in like a while, especially probably to Cam's point, like since 3. Like this probably has like the best story and the best villain. And like it also has like the best protagonist because they tried to Cam's other point there. This is where they stepped more into like the person you play as is nobody. They're just a window for you. And then like in New Dawn, you're just captain. It doesn't matter, what gender you pick or how you dress, you're just captain. And in this, you are Danny Rojas. And even if you pick the male or female, they're both Danny. And like they actually do have like you're in the cutscenes again, like it goes third person and like you get to see you talk and like make these decisions and do things and like interact with the people. It's not just people talking at you constantly. So that's why it's like I feel like they did some things right that are like moving in the right direction and that are like definitely things I think for a Far Cry 7 can be done even better. They also even do the thing where like now when you go you used to have to talk to somebody and then they would talk at you and explain like what the quest was. And then you would have your quest marker and you can go. Now it kind of gives you like that RPG splash screen of like, do you want to accept this quest? And it like, there's a paragraph that like explains what it is to you. And then the NPC is like there in the frame and they'll read the dialogue to you if you sit there and wait. But I like that you can just hit accept and leave immediately. Like you can just be like, just give me the quest. I want to go. Like, and there was times I did that. There were times I'm like, I don't care. I have to go blow up the gas tank. I get it. Like, but I like that like the main character is more of a character, and one of the things I like they did with her, I was playing as female Danny, so one of the things I like they did with her is that she actually sings along to the radio sometimes. So I would just be cruising around in my like 57 Chevy that's like cherry red, and she's just singing to these like cool Spanish jams. And I was like, this is fun. Like it's like this fun, like it's like this moment of levity in like this greater craziness, you know.
Hmm.
But that's why I feel like Danny was definitely like a good, I feel like those were good moves to make it more of like a main character. And then again, like I thought the villain and his son had like a great dynamic, and I thought that like that is like a big focus, and I thought that was definitely like a huge win for the game. If anything, I just wish like the whole game was just Anton and Diego.
Um, Based on kind of your how you were playing through it, what would you say is like the mix of like story versus just doing the Far Cry shit of going and blowing up random things on the roads or taking out outposts, and I guess also one of the things that I think the last two games maybe suffered a little bit from was like you were occasionally overwhelmed in like the random encounter stuff where like I just want to get to the next thing. I don't want to have to like fight off three convoys on my way to the thing I'm trying to get to. So what was, I guess, what's the, did they find a better balance of that this time around?
Yeah, I think they definitely found a better balance of that with those like random encounters in the world, because that was a problem that Far Cry had for a while, and it really peaked in 5 where it was like really bad. But here, they've already just fixed it as a problem where I feel like there's less encounters, that you'll just be like, there's still a ton of soldiers everywhere and random animals and stuff, but I feel like there was less encounters where they would just come attack me when I was trying to do stuff. And also, a thing they added this time that's another really good addition is you can holster your weapon at any time. So if you just go around the world with your weapon holstered, they pretty much won't attack you unless you walk like right up on them.
Okay.
So you can
Oh,
basically
cool.
choose when you want to engage. And if you're like already firing a gun and they're there, they'll come fight you. But it's like you can really avoid a lot of encounters just in the open world, which I did a lot of the time. And I also like that there's a couple big city areas that are literally just like a city, and there's not anything to really do there except for a couple missions that make you go there. But I liked being able to go to like a populated city area with my gun holstered and just walk around, like, because like you can't really do that in Far Cry ever. And even in Far Cry
No.
5, like it was like your outpost town, like it meant nothing. This is like a whole actual city where people are totally unrelated to my revolution or just going about their lives. And like I'm like, it's cool to just go walk around in. And I did a race that was basically, I'm pretty sure it was inspired by the Fast and the Furious, because you race the exact same kind of car that Dom races in Cuba that one time, and you end it by driving off a thing into the water and it explodes. And I was like, I think this is a Fast and the Furious reference.
Definitely sounds like it. Yeah. That's, I mean,
Yeah.
because that's immediately what I think of when I think of like, oh, like Yara and the Cuba kind of like parallel is like, oh, they're leaning into the 50s and 60s vehicles because that's the last time vehicles were imported there, and that kind of like that whole nature of kind of that archetypal country. So yeah, that definitely sounds like something that they would have been fools to not lean into those comparisons and those references, because like obviously like Far Cries are basically the Fast and Furiouses of video games. And that they're just like, none of them make sense. Nobody goes to them for the story, really. It's just the chaos that you experience in them. So any other elements or things you want to highlight? What, so the backpack thing is kind of like
Mhm.
it's like a super weapon, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like? Is that something that like you feel like you got a lot of use out of? Did you play around with like a lot of the different types, or was it kind of a, oh, that's like a cool thing to have, but I'm mostly sticking with like the normal arsenal of weapons?
I think it was mostly the latter there that you said. Is like I always had it, and they give it to you early, and I always had it on me because you always do, and it recharges, and eventually you can get things that make it recharge faster, which definitely helps because it has a really long recharge, which I didn't love. But yeah, like there was two. I only used two. There's like 6 you can buy in the whole game, and I only used 2. And the one is the main one they first give you, which just fires like seeking rockets. But that I thought was a little bit hit and miss, because sometimes I'd very be clearly like, because you can't like lock on, it just fires and it just does whatever it wants. So like there was times I was very clearly trying to hit like a tank or something, and they just went nowhere. Like one time I was in a base and I was in stealth, and I tried to break my stealth to blow up the tank and just start fighting. And instead of the missiles flying up and then hitting the tank, they just went out of the base and hit literally nothing. And I was like, okay, great, thank you. Like, and I blew my stealth cover, and I didn't take out the tank. And that was the only weapon I had to take out the tank at that point because it was so early.
Yeah. So
Uh,
it seems
but
like that, like the weapon was designed to attack things that like you're already engaged with, and if you were in stealth and you hadn't engaged with that tank, like if you had shot like a bullet at the tank first, then maybe it would have worked.
Yeah, I think that probably would have been it. And like eventually you get like better weapons and more arsenal stuff. Because the thing for that I like to deal with tanks is there's an EMP grenade, and I could just hit the thing with an EMP grenade, and I could go hijack it or blow it up. And like that's the move every time, basically. And then there's an EMP backpack that does that. But I was like, why would you wear the backpack and waste your Supremo charge on one EMP when I just have EMP grenades?
Mhm.
And like I don't care that it's a bigger radius. It's like the grenade is fine, like, you know. So I was like, there's some that I think just I obviously I didn't use all of them, but some of them just seem like they weren't really worth it. And the one that I used most of the game is a medic backpack that boosts your healing ability, and then it gives you a self revive when you die. So since I played solo the whole time, that was like super clutch, and it made me, if anything, play more dangerous just because I had a self revive that would like recharge after a while. But like that really was the one that I rocked most of the time. And so for that, and for me in solo play, that was really, really, really helpful to have. But that also meant I didn't have one of the like damage dealing Supremos, and I could change them in the menu at any point, but they all use the same recharge.
Yeah.
So it was really more helpful to just have the self revive when, especially when 9 times out of 10, like I'm just out there alone, because all the companions in the game are all animals and they can't revive you. So that was one thing I don't like, is that they took away like the human companions, or they call them amigos in this game. And there's characters they add that I really like that I wish could have just been my companion that I could go roll around in the world with, and you just can't. And like that's one thing that I think that I didn't love, especially because a lot of the animal companions, I didn't like what they did, and they just, a lot, like half of them felt useless to me.
Mhm.
And then the two that worked were the one that the dog that picks up items and tracks people, and then there's a panther and an alligator that'll attack people. But the panther is really good because it's like a stealth, because it's a panther. So it like at one point I killed a base commander, and it, since the panther, I was like, hey, go kill that guy. It ran through the camp, killed him without alerting anyone. Since it killed it, it gave me his key card, and I could go into the security room, and I disabled all of their alarms and everything. And I was like, all right, now this is the amigo that like you want to have. Like, but that's why some of those things that they're just so like they're additional, and it's nice that they're there, but so much of it is just like, you know, you don't even need it really. And the main arsenal they give you of just weapons is more than enough to get through everything, especially because like the stealth in this game I think is actually really good.
That's
Like
good.
Before, there's been probably like you can do stealth in Far Cry, but I feel like it's always a little bit wonky. And especially one of the things that I would try to do is like you go get that big sniper rifle with a silencer, and you hang out outside the base and you try to snipe people, but they always knew exactly where you were. And in this time, I could totally take out a whole base just by sniping people from a radio tower that was like 200 meters away and not alert anyone. And I was like, okay, so I don't know exactly what they did, but it's the AI or it's whatever, how they tweaked it, that it just feels a lot better. That, and I feel like all the options that they give you there's just a lot more options to do things now, especially with all the different kinds of equipment you can rock. But then it is hampered a bit by what you were talking about with the different ammo types, where like if you have the wrong ammo type, your gun is completely worthless. Like I got a really good sniper rifle really early on that only it's a unique weapon, so it already has all the mods attached to it, and you can't change it. But it had soft target rounds, which is for unarmored enemies. But that's like, those enemies don't exist in the game, especially after you play it for like 5 hours, because the first thing they do is get armor. So I had a sniper rifle that's just like worthless. And the one that wasn't a unique weapon that I customized was 10 times more powerful, because I had armor piercing rounds. And even if you shoot a guy who's not wearing armor with armor piercing rounds, he still dies.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, like there's just little things they did that I think could have used more balancing and tweaking, because it's like they added it, but it's like not fully fleshed out. And I think it'll get fleshed out better in like a sequel Far Cry.
Okay. Or like the expansion or DLC, or what, like whatever the Far Cry 6 spinoff is that'll come out next year, a la A New Dawn kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or Primal. Okay. Any other things you wanted to ask about or add to the conversation there, Cam?
No, we pretty much covered everything. I am really sad that they continue to move away from the RPG elements. I think Far Cry 3 still has like that incredible upgrade tree, like the 3 different sections, and seeing them drift further and further away from that is like disheartening. But
I also really miss the hunting to get upgrades. Like hunting
that's
is
really
just
another thing. There's no hunting.
Yeah, because you can hunt, but it does nothing. You can trade the meat. You can either get a ability where you can cook and get a buff like Monster Hunter, which was kind of useless to me at least, and then you can just trade the meat and whatever for like parts to go craft like weapon mods and stuff. But all of it was like I didn't do any of it like the whole game basically, and that was a thing in 3 I liked is I liked having to go hunt those like mythical animals to get a better wallet, to like get a better ammo, to get better whatever. And this game takes a lot of that away where like you only ever have one heal and that heal recharges. It's not like a medicine pouch that you get more like syringes for. You can't get more ammo. One thing that did kind of bother me too is with the weapon mods is like you can't get extended mags on like anything. And like so the weapon mods are just like scopes and silencers and like really basic stuff. And I'm like in Far Cry 3, you could totally deck your stuff out with like all these crazy mods. You wanted extended mag, you wanted a grenade launcher, you want whatever. Like, but it seems like they pulled a lot of that back. And I was like, it kills me that I used a rifle the entire game. It's like the second weapon I got, and I kept upgrading it. And it's a rifle I like from previous Far Cry. So I was just serendipitous. I found it. But it annoys me that I couldn't get an extended mag. And for the entire game, I had 15 rounds in that mag. And all of the other, like, I didn't want a silencer on it. That was my assault rifle for when I was in big open combat. It had armor piercing rounds I put on there. So I'm like, I wanted like more like combat options, and all I could have done is get a silencer or a different scope, and none of that would have helped me, you know? So I stopped using weapon mods like super early because the unique weapons that are already modded are better most of the time. And if they're not, you pick the mods you want and that's it. You're never going to change them. There's like no point, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the kind of bouncing off of that? Is there a like in-game currency? Are they trying to like get you to buy additional stuff through that, or can you like get that stuff at a decent pace in game if you want to try and get some of those like, you know, high-end unique weapons or something like that?
Yeah, so with those high-end unique weapons, they're all found out in the world. Like they're just in like bases and in just places in the world, and like you can like find like IGN's map of like where all the unique weapons are, and or like even when you first start the game, you can go to the hardest area and go to like the capital city and like take one of the best weapons and just have that with you the whole game. So that's cool at least. But then the like crafting materials that are there, it seems like there isn't like a kind of like any kind of like was it microtransactions. Like there is different types of materials and currencies, but all of it seems like it's in the game itself, and none of it, like I didn't see any options to like buy anything, or like, you know how in Assassin's Creed you can get that like other currency and then buy stuff,
the
like
Helix credits. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was asking for, because I remember like they had those in Far Cry 5 too. Where
and
like,
as far as
you could buy like weirdly decked out shovels or some of those kinds of things. Like you could get cars or guns that were like, you could pay money for them and get them if you couldn't find them in the game or whatever.
Yeah, and I didn't see that option anywhere here because there is the different types of like currencies, and because there's pesos which you can buy stuff with, and then there's also a different money system you get for like doing special missions that I didn't love. But then you can use that currency to buy stuff, but like none of the actual currencies or anything of the materials seemed like you could actually go buy them. At least from all the options that I saw. Basically everything seems like it's kind of self-contained within the game, at least at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at like there's a Far Cry 6 starter pack that has a whole bunch of like coins or something that I guess maybe that's just like it's buying you pesos that you can get out there. But okay, so it looks like you can buy like credits in game. So so there's definitely something out there that they're trying to get you to spend.
They figured out how to get it in there.
And it's the kind of thing like I wonder if it may not be in there now, but Ubisoft has done this a ton where they like patch in later a thing you can buy that'll give you like experience point bonuses or something like that. But also if there isn't like an RPG element of this one, I guess there's probably not anything to like really, you're not leveling up your character. So
it would probably just be like crafting resources, and because there's a bunch of different resources for like there's resources for your camp, there's resources for your guns, and then there's also resources for there's like these things called bandito operations, which is totally that thing of like it's like the Assassin Brotherhood where you build up people and like send them on missions, but you can use materials there too. So, but it's just a thing of like, I could see them putting in the option to like, hey, buy materials, but you really don't need to, because I felt flush with materials the entire time and I didn't even finish, I didn't 100% the whole game. Like, so that was just my kind of takeaway, at least.
Cool. All right. Well, then I think we can probably shift onwards to talking about Back for Blood. Thank you for the report there on Far Cry 6, Frank. Thanks for biting the bullet for us on that one, because that's definitely one. Like I think Cameron and I have talked about it. I think Logan and I have talked about it in our various like most anticipated games, and it was kind of like we've been burned on by Far Cry too many times to get excited for Far Cry 6, and it very much, for me at least, has been like the maybe if it's on a Black Friday sale for like half price or something, I'll pick it up, or I'll pick it up in January or February or something like that, and then maybe sit down and spend some time with it if there's nothing else really like grabbing my attention. But like I think I've just kind of like, if you've played one Far Cry, it feels like you've kind of played them all at this point. And I'm just not like, so if I'm ever in a mood for that kind of game, then I can go and hop in that kind of game. But at this point, I'm like, I'm fine not doing Far Cry right now. So, but I'm glad you had fun with it. And thank you for kind of enlightening us on some of the key changes and stuff. So yeah, let's dive into Back for Blood. I know Cam, you in particular said you'd played some more of this. I don't remember if you said you'd played a little bit more, Frank.
I haven't.
Okay.
I pretty much put it down and haven't gone back since last time I played it like a week or two ago.
Okay. So hit us with some of your updated Back for Blood thoughts there, Cam.
Well, I finally beat it.
Okay.
So, I know last week, was it last week that I was on, or was it the week before
I think it was
about Back?
Yeah, I think it was last week.
Yeah, last week I had gotten through half the acts, which is like the levels.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple things I want to hit on as to update kind of like my thoughts from last week. One, I will say that the AI, it's interesting that the AI is so good, but at the same time so dumb. It has like, getting towards the late game, it's really shown a lot of like the kind of like flaws of it, where it's like just not strategic use of items in like high pressure moments. And it really came down to, I was totally fine with the AI up until the last level. The last level is perhaps like the most obnoxious, most like Left 4 Dead level that I've ever played in this game. But it really all came to a head for over a couple of things. One, I couldn't beat it on my own. I couldn't do it in solo mode. It's too difficult to do it because there's not enough focus fire from the AI to help you out with that. And so I needed to go into like multiplayer to do that. Second thing, this is on me. I was doing multiplayer very late at night. So the only people I was grouping up with were people who either didn't talk or were speaking in a different language. But that language is Spanish, and I do know what they were calling me. So, as far as like names go, and like being upset that I wasn't doing, like I didn't know the ins and outs of this level, because I'd only been playing it solo, I know exactly what they were calling me. Like I know enough Spanish to know
what they were telling
what
you
I'm being called.
to do tu madre.
Yeah, it's like I wish it was just tu madre.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it was just that. There was a lot of other things that I do know that in Spanish, because like I grew up in Phoenix and I grew up particularly in Central Mesa. Like Spanish has been like, I may not speak it fluently, but I've definitely picked up on what words I should be upset about if somebody like looks at me and says them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, there's that. So yeah, but I finally beat it last night, or not last night. I think it was like late Friday night, early Saturday morning. But it was great. There is still so much about this game that I really, really love. But that last level is bullshit. And I have to say that the way that this game cripples you in single player mode versus like the plethora of things you can unlock in multiplayer mode, where like none of that is unlockable in single player mode. is perhaps one of the worst game design decisions I've ever seen. It is very, very, very cruel to lock basically 90, like, I wouldn't say 95. To lock, I would probably say like a good, like, 60% of this game is locked behind multiplayer. And it's extremely frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I don't know, I don't like being called certain names in Spanish, people.
That's fair.
But at the same time, like, you know, it was interesting because the last level, especially the last Act 4, is just a single level. And it's it's a big boss fight. It's this enormous, big, massive boss fight that you never get in any other zombie game, really. And it's an awesome fight. But like the AI isn't smart enough to kind of like pick up details about like what they need to do in that boss fight to like stay alive. And on the flip side of that, like dealing with like teammates that are not willing to cooperate and communicate at the beginning of that level makes the beginning of that level very difficult and very hard to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Because if people don't know the ins and outs of whatever strategy you want to be using, it doesn't go well. And it's really easy on that part of the level to like waste a lot of supplies.
So I know from hearing other people talk about it, I think you guys talked about this a little bit, like there's pretty fluid drop in, drop out functionality in like the multiplayer experience. So if you're in a case where you are like, you're playing with these guys who are being dicks and you want to bounce from them, is there any penalty if you just drop from them? And basically say like
I don't know,
peace
because
out
I don't
and walk away.
I don't do that.
You didn't decide to test that.
Listen, was I caught off guard by the verbal abuse? Yes. Does being verbally abused mean that I quit my squad? No. I've played way too many MMOs and first person shooters over the years to have that be a policy. Which maybe I should revisit that, because clearly I was bothered by it.
From my time, I dropped out of one of my groups pretty early in, and it wasn't because of that. I just dropped out, went and ended up squatting up with some other randos. But it didn't seem like there was any penalty for leaving.
I don't think there is.
And I think I might have left in. I think I might have finished the one round and then left in between rounds. I don't remember, but there didn't seem like there was any kind of penalty for dropping.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it might be something to evaluate if you. I guess the bigger question then is, now that you've beaten it, Cam, are you going to go back to it, given your frustrations with single player and you don't really want to play this multiplayer? Is there any reason to go back to it, or?
Yeah, because like half the roster of characters is locked behind the last chapter of Act 1. You have to like clear the boat leveled on multiplayer in order to unlock these other 4 characters. And I really want to try using these other 4 characters because they seem really cool. It's just it's a pain in the ass that they locked it behind it like this. And I just think it's such a deaf not deaf, but like, what's the word I'm looking for? I think deaf is part of it, but it's like
a deaf knell.
No, sorry, tonal. It's like it's
deaf. Gotcha.
It's so tone deaf. It's tone deaf. Sorry.
There you go.
Like, there's a phrase that I'm looking for here, but it's so tone deaf of like what you would like. Why would you even put a single player in this game if you're going to not allow people to unlock anything in single player? Well, we want people to like enjoy, like, get through the story if they want to. It's like, cool, but then why are you punishing them by not allowing them to unlock other stuff? You can't unlock supply lines. You can't unlock characters, customizations, outfits, like any of this cool stuff that makes going through this game multiple times a lot of fun is locked in multiplayer. And you're basically saying, if you want to play single player, we'll let you, but fuck you.
I mean, so as I was going through the Halo flight, which I admittedly I know you weren't able to get into, but it was the same kind of thing. Like, I couldn't, if I was just doing the stuff against bots, I wasn't unlocking anything. I wasn't progressing through in like the season pass thing that they have in it. Because that, like, they made that all locked behind kind of like the online play component. I imagine that's like like I imagine it's the kind of it strikes me as the kind of thing of like, well, yeah, if you only did it through single player, you probably like find exploits easier and just kind of like do like the first level over and over and over again and like grind out all that stuff and get all that stuff without the experience that they want you to have anyway, which is like they clearly built this for the online experience.
I can see that being the case, but I think the difference between that is the flight for Halo is a multiplayer flight that they want people to like explore and engage in, because it's the entire point of that flight is to test its multiplayer servers.
I mean, as I understand, it's going to be the same in the real game.
For sure.
Like, but you're not going to be leveling up your season pass stuff if you're only playing against bots in the training stuff.
But I think there's a difference between it being a training mode with bots to it being a single player mode, a solo campaign mode. Okay. If you're saying this is a solo campaign, great. But that you're also saying this is a campaign, which means that you're progressing through, and you should be feeling like you are unlocking something. I would suppose. Like I think that would just be a built-in understanding of that. To the point where like I was surprised that there wasn't stuff that you could only unlock in solo mode. I don't know. It's extremely tone deaf for what you touted the solo campaign mode as like a. We understand that some people don't have good internet, and we understand that some people don't want it. Like some people just do not have good experiences in multiplayer. Some people have like things that make it harder for them to play the game at a high enough level as far as like adaptability and disability go, but they still want to play these games on their own terms. And I think it just falls more and more in line with this idea of we have our like if your vision of this game is that it is a multiplayer game, don't do a solo campaign. Like if you're not allowing the solo campaign to have any, even if it's like because my understanding before I started it was the solo campaign locks out achievements, which is like fine, whatever, but it also like you don't get as many of like the progression system as you do in multiplayer, like, or it was like slower or otherwise like locked up somewhere. To find out that everything is locked behind multiplayer, it was very frustrating. But then on top of that, like how easy it was to unlock stuff in like multiplayer, and you didn't even think about maybe like implementing a like slower version of like, or a nerfed version of like gathering these supplies for supply lines for single player is kind of like really upsetting in a lot of ways. I said kind of really upsetting. It's really upsetting in a lot of ways. I can understand the frustration that a lot of people have been having about it single player, but the downside is like I just don't think that the developers care. Their response when when people played the single player and found out that it was going to be like that for the live game, the solo campaign stuff was going to basically be completely locked away from being able to unlock anything. And their response to that felt super tone deaf at the time, and it feels even like it honestly kind of like I look back and I read it and I think of it more as like a slap to the face. Like we know how our games is like we have our vision, we know what we want to do with this. Like get fucked. I'm being a bit harsh on the developers in this sense, but it is just extremely frustrating for there to be an advertised and promoted solo campaign mode that is a like objectively worse version of the multiplayer mode and multiplayer campaign. Mm-hmm. So those are my updated thoughts on it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just looking to see what their response to that criticism had been.
It was on Twitter. It was
yeah. I mean,
if you look at Brandon Gann, he's actually somebody who commented on it.
I mean, yeah. I know most of my knowledge of these frustrations came from seeing what Brandon was saying about it. But yeah, I'm seeing They post on Twitter, "We've heard your frustration with progressing in solo mode and are thinking about how we can address the problem. Thank you for your patience and feedback at this point. We'll have more news as we thought about possible ways to implement it." But this was, I mean, this looks like probably before launch. So, yeah, or October 10th, so 2 weeks ago. So probably around the time of launch. And that's just the most recent update that I was able to find in a quick Google search. I won't waste time diving down that rabbit hole, but I'm glad you were able to at least get through it and see what that is. And I'll be curious. We might not cover it on the show anymore, but I'll be curious just to hear if you keep going back to it, if you actually keep going back to it, or if you say, well, no, I am not going to deal with these frustrations and these problems, and I'm going to just focus on other things that I can play solo and not have that multiplayer experience on. So, okay. Well, then let us dive into our main topic of the show, our big topic, Dune. Finally out. It's finally here. Obviously, after it was supposed to be out this time last year, but then this whole pandemic thing hit. So we've all seen it. Correct. You said you'd seen it, or you could talk about it. So I assume you've seen it, Frank, right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Cool. So yeah, we've all seen it. Did you watch it, Frank, in theater, or did you just watch it on HBO Max?
I streamed it on HBO Max, and which I thought like I wanted to see it in theater because I know it would look so nice, but I was like, I have a good enough setup. And then after watching it, I was like, I kind of wish I saw it in theater. Like it still looked great, but I was like, this is definitely like a theater thing for sure.
Yeah, that's both Cam and I went and saw it at our local, not Alamo, because our Alamo is gone now, but they rebranded as Majestic Phoenix. So we went and saw it there. And we both I think really enjoyed it. So before we dive in, we'll do as we always do. We'll kind of do the spoiler free stuff, and then we'll do spoiler filled, and I'll put the timestamps in the description for this. But spoiler free. Before we even dive into spoiler free, I just kind of want to get a gauge of everybody's experience or background with Dune. Like for myself, never seen the David Lynch version. I've never read the books. I know about Dune because I've either watched videos about the David Lynch Dune version or just kind of seeped into my general pop culture experience. And then in the lead up to this version, I've watched various, like, here's everything, all the Easter eggs in the trailers and stuff, kind of giving a sense. So I kind of I knew the general direction of the story and where these characters were going into it, despite not having read anything. So that's kind of my background. Cameron, we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but you've read the book, you said, right?
I should note, I read the book in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I've only read it once. I read the first trilogy, like the first 3 books. There's like 6 of them. But I read the first 3 books in high school. So I have a deep love of Dune because it's just like there's so much about it. I don't want to say too much about it because there are like future spoilers for sure, that I would be spoiling if I explained why I love everything about Dune.
I mean, knowing just from this movie the amount of lore richness that is in Dune and the different cultures and the different like historical societies and stuff like that, this definitely screams a like Cameron kind of thing.
Yeah, Dune is probably a great example of like where my love of lore started. Because you can read Dune just by itself and just like be a standalone thing that's really, really phenomenal. And then if you understand the background of these, like the different orders that exist, the different organizations. I was watching a Kind of Funny's review of it. Not in review, sorry, but they're like just overall review of Dune.
Yeah, their screencast.
The screencast that they did. And it was really funny to kind of see them be like grabbing on to certain things. They're like, yeah, like I think at one point somebody called essentially the Imperial forces that join up with House Harkonnen, called them the Unsullied.
Mm-hmm. And
it's like, yeah, like, and they were like calling them like mercenaries, and I'm like, they're not. Like, you have like these are the elite of the Imperial army, to the point where like it's an entire planet focused on producing these people. Like, guys, like, come on, like, I get the app, like, oh, we want to compare it to things like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. Like, this is so much more than that, and you have to understand, like, this is why like House Harkonnen was afraid to even go up against House Atreides, like, 1-to-1, because House Atreides has such an elite fighting force that one fighting person of House Atreides is worth dozens of House Harkonnen.
Mhm.
And so they needed the Imperial blades to essentially be a like backup force, and to like essentially to sneak in and like kill House Atreides soldiers from behind, because House Harkonnen, even outnumbering them 3-to-1, didn't have a shot at taking on House Atreides.
Yeah.
Like, it's so cool to see, like, and to also understand like the history. There's an amazing scene where Duke Leto is talking to Duke Harkonnen, and Duke Harkonnen is giving him a monologue about like how he's like, our families have traded blood for centuries, and he's talking about it. And if you understand like what he like, the not like, oh yeah, they've been at war for like they've been in conflict with each other for centuries. If you understand like the history of their families and like the different kinds of leaders that have been in charge, because it's not like one is like House Good Guy and one is House Bad Guy. Like, there have been not great leaders of House Atreides before that have really hurt really like good people of House Harkonnen. Like, their attitudes towards each other now are emblematic of the Hatfields and McCoys, but if you also put that in space and had it go for centuries.
So Cameron has read the books in terms of Cameron's background. Cameron has read the books. Have you ever watched did you ever watch the David Lynch movie? You've watched that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I watched David Lynch. I've watched the sci-fi miniseries.
Right.
Both of the original Dune as well as its sequel stuff they did for sci-fi, including one starring a James McAvoy early on in his career. He plays a sequel character, so I won't get too much into anything about him, but it is very, very cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And then how about you, Frank? What's your history or background with Dune?
I don't have a ton of history with it. I haven't read the books, and I haven't seen any of the adaptations before. I have read part of the first page of the first book, but that's a really dumb story. But I always remember I have read like the opening couple sentences, and I was like, it's all right,
This book, based just on the first couple sentences, probably a good book. All right.
I was like, I get it, I had heard about it before then, and so it's a thing I've always definitely heard about, and I know there's a lot of love for, but I don't have a lot of experience with. But that's it was interesting to just dive in, and like I've only seen a couple of the trailers, and like they don't explain a ton to you, obviously. So I was definitely just like, I don't know what I'm really getting in for, but I'm here for it. I'm gonna punch my ticket and go on this ride.
Mm-hmm.
I should point out, they don't explain things.
Well,
even in the book, there's not a lot of explanation. There's a lot of description, but there's not a lot of like. There is no like Frank Hubert, who's the author, did not hold anybody's fucking hand in these in this stuff. It's like there's context clues and like some small bits of expositional narration in the third person. There is not a character who's like, oh, how does this work? So that doesn't exist in Dune.
Yeah,
so
but I like
who are
that though.
I don't understand what's going on or how any of this technology works. Congratulations, you're not supposed to. They don't tell you. Spice somehow powers interstellar travel. There you go.
I mean, that's a weird thing. I know that I've picked that up from like other pop, like from actually I think is where I picked up how how Spice allows the navigators to like run the numbers in their heads to figure out the secrets behind and the lanes, because Spice basically like turns them into like supercomputers, and what they're like weird like hideous monstrosities in the David Lynch version, but that's not really what, like, there's nothing to support that. So like I mean the guy who's basically like the captain of the guard for House Atreides, is one of those. And like when he does like his eyes roll up in his head, he's like running the numbers and stuff, and like I was able to pick up on that and follow that that's what's going on in those moments, because I have a little bit of that like context clues just in my
Mhm.
in the back of my brain. But I was gonna say, like, I thought, I mean, staying spoiler free still for the moment, I thought the movie does a very good job of introducing you to the key players, setting up their relationships, and establishing the core dynamics and the core, factions of this. There are a couple times where, like, in a fight, both sides kind of look the same, so I don't quite know who's got the upper hand in a battle or something like that. But like, even that is like, by the end of the scene, you know who won and who lost because
Mhm.
of the way certain characters are reacting to things, or just the understanding of the direction the plot is moving. I thought the film does a really good job of that, and I think a lot of that comes down to Denis Villeneuve's pacing, which,
Mhm.
much like I think a lot of people had issues with Blade Runner 2049, it is slow and methodical and deliberate. Which is funny because I also think of that as like, those are the exact same ways people describe Randy Orton doing rest holds in wrestling right now, where it's like, it's, oh, classic Orton, where he just kind of like holds somebody in a headlock for 2 minutes while they can kind of catch their breath and stuff. Um, but the positive of that level of pacing is everything gets a moment to breathe, and you get to understand the ramifications of the big and small decisions that are happening throughout this. And I like it. It allowed me, I think, permission to like catch up and stay along, as opposed to feel like I was being left behind because I didn't have kind of because I hadn't read the books or seen the previous David Lynch version and stuff like that. So I think that's a testament to the direction and just the storytelling, because there are a few times where it's like, okay, now we're diving into like exposition, and it's like the basically like the hologram teacher or whatever, or the book that Paul is reading a couple times, or that Paul is like watching or experiencing. Those are like the only couple of times where it really gets into like, here's stuff that we can't really tell you in a more natural sense, so we're going to
Mhm.
give it to you, but at least we're going to give it to you in the context of like, it's a history book, or it is like Paul doing research on what's going to happen on Arrakis, and the kinds of people that he's going to meet there or whatever. So I appreciated that, versus I know like the original, the 84 Dune has a lot of like internal monologuing and stuff like that to help kind of like explain what characters are thinking. Like, this didn't need that. There's a little bit here and there based on like Paul's dreams and stuff that you get throughout, but like for the most part, it's like characters are having these conversations, and it feels more or less natural, and you're able to kind of like follow along the story in that regard. So I really appreciated that. I don't know if either of you guys want to speak on the direction and pacing of as well, before we dive again, before like not diving into spoilers yet, but um yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. I'm like 100% with you because I came in with even less knowledge of like the world and that stuff than like, I came in with definitely the least on like our panel here. But I felt like I was able to completely follow and understand everything that everybody was doing and saying, and all this world building and the stuff about like, the empire. And even now we're like, Cam was talking about the group of like people that there was like, oh, we called them mercenaries. And I was like, oh, the Sadankar. Like, I'm already on board now with like this whole universe. And I besides the fact I really enjoyed it, it's a thing of I felt like it did a really good job of explaining everything without having that guy be in the room who's like, but why, how, what is this? And that's like very, especially with like, like having some Star Wars character there that's just like, I need all the exposition on like what's going to happen in the next scene. And I'm like, I don't need that. We can just have a really quiet, like pondering moment.
Yeah.
And I picked up everything I need,
And I mean, like in a lesser made version of this, like Paul is that guy. Paul is
Yeah.
like your point of
Mhm.
view character of this story, obviously, and he's the one really like grappling with all this stuff and dealing with all this stuff for the first time. And it's just a matter of like how much of that is already known to him, or how much of it is like it's being introduced to him through these conversations with his father, with his mother, with through his dreams, through Duncan, Idaho. Like it's so, like he's getting all those conversations just in a much more natural kind of like
Mhm.
doling out that information here and there. Cam, you were gonna jump in?
Sure. Honestly, I love the way that they introduce things. The fact that it's like, oh, we're gonna do this exposition thing in the like the holo recordings. They don't just be like, oh yeah, here's Paul watching a holo recording. They emphasize how serious Paul takes language.
Mm-hmm.
They emphasize it's like Paul's not just doing this because it's like, yeah, it's just something for us to do in this scene. This is telling you something about Paul as a person. That he is somebody who does read these things, listen to others, pays attention, learns languages. I really, really love the way that Denis Villeneuve like approaches this in a way that Paul is a nerd, but at the same time he's been trained in a way to, and I think the final fight in the movie is a great example. Is that he's not just some. You might mistake when you look at Paul that he's supposed to be some wimpy, whiny kid, but it's not that. It's never that. Paul is distinctly aware that there is more to what's going on, but he also knows that he has to play it a certain way. Otherwise, like he can't be I wanted to go down to this Tashi station and get
exactly.
some.
He's not the Luke
Get some
Skywalker.
converters. Yeah, he's not Luke Skywalker.
But he is basically the template for like Luke, because obviously Dune predates Star Wars, and A New Hope in particular has such strong, like, now seeing this story kind of in retrospect, like A New Hope has significant Dune influences, obviously with Tatooine, but then even just kind of the broader, like, lone hero versus an empire kind of storyline.
For sure, and it's a whole thing about and it's interesting to note because like Dune is actually a deconstruction of A Hero with a Thousand Faces, where Star Wars is a reconstruction of A Hero with a Thousand Faces. The incredibly insightful narrative theory book by Joseph Campbell that he basically went. Just for those of you who don't know, Joseph Campbell's a philosopher and psychiatrist who went through numerous cultures and found these identifiers that basically it's like all human storytelling, regardless of origin or location, share these distinct markers in some way, and it's something that as human beings is something we all psychologically share as some sort of primordial template. And so Dune is actually, as a story, is a deconstruction of that, which people will see if we can get another one of these. You will see like how the setup that we get from this film is then like further explored and constructed, recontextualized, and deconstructed going forward. And I think Villeneuve is the perfect director for this. And I really, really, really hope we get a second one. That being said, so when it comes to what they're doing with the narrative and whatnot, especially with Paul is a reluctant hero. Paul would love just to be a guy who just a regular noble guy, but the fact that he sees this greater destiny in front of him and he understands the weight of it, I think separates him from a lot of heroes in a lot of other stories. And that's something I really appreciate and like. And I think Timothée Chalamet, who I don't know, have either of you seen The King on Netflix, starring Timothée Chalamet? When I saw The King,
I was like,
Netflix,
why were we talking about The King last week? Oh, that's right, because that's the one. It's got Timothée Chalamet and it's got Robert Pattinson.
Yes,
you're bringing it up in the context of Robert Pattinson as Batman. But it's him as Henry V, right? It's basically the Henry V Shakespeare.
It is a brutal deconstruction of Shakespeare's Henry V with the reality of the historical Henry V, in a way that is just done super well. But Timothée Chalamet successfully in that one does an incredible job of portraying somebody who understands the weight of a crown and does not enjoy such a weight. And he does a brilliant job of being a live, slim looking person, like a weaker looking person, and then in actual combat, Timothée Chalamet's phenomenal in that movie as like doing combat. So when I heard he was being Paul, I got pumped because I'm like, this is the guy you want for Paul Atreides, because Paul comes off as meek, mild, reserved, he's more of like a spiritual, prophetic, like character, like hero. And it's like, no, he can be this figure that they're all looking for. And he knows that he can, but he understands the weight of it as well. And so like, I think that Villeneuve was perfect director to explore that character story. But it also there is so much that I love about Duke Leto and Jessica, to the point where like I told you this yesterday, Trevor, but he threw in that scene where like Duke Leto, it's like
again,
a very
let's not dive into spoilers yet. So
yeah, like he throws in a random scene that I don't think exists anywhere else, but it's just like such a if you know these characters and you know their history and you know their future, it's such a big moment. And he's so good. And so like, I honestly, my spoiler free stuff is like, watch this movie, whether it's on, and by the way, it turns out, Warner Brothers specifically wants to see if this does well on, HBO Max, / Warner, whatever their dumb subscription service is called.
Yeah. They've definitely come out and been like, because originally it was like, hey, if this does well enough in theaters, we'll move it. But since they made the decision at the beginning of the year to put everything day and date on HBO Max, they kind of pivoted that, because Denis Villeneuve was very much out there being like, you've hampered like this movie's ability to do well in theaters. So yeah, they've come out and said like, no, like we'll keep an eye on how it does on HBO Max as well. And so yeah, they have basically like whatever their arbitrary numbers are of like, if it does well enough, you'll get a part 2, because this very much is a part 1 kind of a movie. And I'm certainly hopeful that it gets a part 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So my whole thing is, normally I'd be like, wait, like, because this is a film that is a love letter to cinema. Just on every aspect. I'm so glad Trevor and I saw it in theaters first, because it's just such a phenomenal experience. Frank, I know you saw it on HBO Max. Here's the thing. That's good.
Yeah, it still looked great.
Oh, yeah. People should watch this. If you can't go to the theater, if you don't feel safe going to the theater, watch this 30 times on HBO Max. I'm for that. Like, this is one of those times where it's like, support the theater. Like, go to there. Just watch this movie. Wherever you want to watch it, however you want to watch it, watch this movie. It deserves to be watched. I want a part 2 really, really badly. So I don't care if you're watching it on HBO Max. Just don't pirate it. That's my only request. Pay the $15. Watch it 30 times. Also watch maybe like James Gunn, The Suicide Squad. There's other cool stuff on HBO Max as well.
Curb Your Enthusiasm is about to come back for another season.
Yeah, there you go. Curb Your Enthusiasm.
The Suicide Squad might not be on HBO Max anymore. Like, because the thing is, like, everyone, it's like you get the movie on HBO Max for the first month, then it comes off for a while and has this weird, like, it's still in theaters, but then it comes back to HBO Max some point down the line. So yeah, I think right now we're in that like dark, like black hole for the Suicide Squad. But yeah, this specific Dune specifically is on HBO Max until November 21st. And of course I will echo that. I'm glad we saw it in theaters, and I specifically I waited to see it for the first time in a theater because I was very tempted to just throw it on HBO Max the couple days before we ended up seeing it. And then seeing it in the theater, I'm tempted to go back and see it again on IMAX because of how cool and grandiose some of these sequences and shots are. But as I said yesterday, I also very much want to watch it on HBO Max with the subtitles on, because there were definitely like sequences that I didn't catch everything that was being said, or because it is using a lot of like foreign terminology or unknown terminology to me. Like I want to have that reinforced in what I'm seeing. Like they say Bene Jesuits the kind of like multiple times throughout their Jesuits, and I was like, I don't like. I still have to like look it up to to know that I'm talking about the right thing, just
Yep.
because it's so like the Sarkonnen or whatever, that are kind of the elite Imperial force. Like I don't have those, at arm's reach to just grab those words out of out of the air for me, and watching it on HBO Max with subtitles and stuff helps reinforce that for me. So I'm gonna probably watch it in all of these places, and in particular, yeah, I definitely want to try and see it on a giant IMAX screen if I can before it leaves those theaters as well.
God, yeah. Let me know if when you're gonna do that. I might just join you with that
Yeah.
because that sounds like a fun time. I like watch this movie wherever you're gonna watch it. It's so great. It's so much fun. It's everybody is perfect in it. The film is incredible. I'm sorry if you don't like slow films. I don't give a shit. Watch this anyway. You don't like sci-fi? Don't care. Watch it anyway. I do things for you. Do this for me, please. I want another one. I want a sequel. I want another Dune. I do not want this to be one of those things where I get something I love and it's like taken out at the ankle by people's apathy and not caring enough to actually like engage with it to the point where we get a follow-up. I don't want this to be that case. Please don't make me go insane wondering what could have been with a Dune Part 2. Please.
We got 3 Hobbit movies. I don't need all of the Dune stories told, especially based on what I'm seeing online and stuff, that maybe some of those after the first one aren't as great. But like at least give us like the ending of this story. Like we had to sit through, and admittedly I never sat through any of those Hobbit movies, but yeah, it's definitely a like please let this happen. Frank, any final spoiler free thoughts from you before we dive into the spoiler conversation?
Yeah, it's just I totally agree with pretty much everything y'all were saying there too. Where I just recommend watching it, and even whatever your preferred format is, if it's theater, IMAX, or even if you're just streaming it. Like I heard Snowbike and Mike watch it on a phone, which makes me laugh. But he watched the movie. He watched the movie, and I'm with Cam there. Where I really hope we get a part 2. Because I definitely. Going in, I didn't know it was just going to be part 1, which makes sense because I guess the story is gigantic, and that's where I'm like, I definitely want to know how it ends because I'm very invested at this point. At least, like I like the world and the stories a lot. To do my final kind of spoiler-free thing is I know Cam was kind of not liking the Game of Thrones comparison, but I was actually like, wow, this is a lot like Game of Thrones. This is like Game of Thrones in space, which for me means it's like way better. I was like, oh my god, get rid of the fantasy shit. Now we have this awesome sci-fi backdrop, like, and they're talking about the different houses and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like, so that's where I was like, I like the world. I like the universe. I want more of this like content,
Yeah, and again, it's like given the age of things, it's actually Game of Thrones is like Dune, but in a fantasy setting, kind of.
Very much
thing.
like Dune was a big inspiration for George R.R. Martin when he said, because originally when he wrote Game of Thrones, the first book, he wanted to write, because before that he'd done television work, and so he wanted to write a fantasy novel that was too big for television, that was too big for film at the time. And then he successfully got like one of the best adaptations early on. Certainly not by the end, but like early on. One of the best adaptations that you could ask for. And so he...
but he also ended up writing one that was too big for books too, because he's never going to finish that series.
Don't say that. Like after Murata died, not finishing Berserk, I can't do that, Trevor. He needs to finish it. Don't put that out there.
I mean, just prepare yourself. Dude's not a spring chicken. And we haven't gotten the Winds of Winter or whatever. Is that the one that's still yet to come out? And that's only book 6. So
yeah.
Anyway, my final kind of spoiler free thoughts are I mean, obviously echoing kind of a lot of what's already been said, but I will just reinforce like all the performances in this are phenomenal. Like there's everybody showed up to play. And knocks it out of the park, and just in really cool and engaging ways, that I'm like excited to see more from some of the characters that we don't get a ton of time with in this one, but are gonna presumably be more of a presence in the sequel or whatever. And yeah, I very much also of course want a part 2, and just also from a like visually and orally, like sonically, breathtaking on both fronts. I think it is an incredible like feast for the eyes. which is especially impressive given how much of this movie is browns and just kind of like, I mean, obviously like Arrakis is a desert planet, and it's very easy to make that not look engaging, but the interior sets that we see on it, the various kind of exteriors, obviously they went out and shot like in Jordan, so it's got like real grand desert shots and stuff like that. Really impressive. And then yeah, just like the sound design I think is also incredibly impressive. Maybe not always going to be the best mix depending on your theater. Like I said, there were some things I definitely couldn't catch what was being said amidst the other stuff. But that's also, I've got ears that were destroyed by many years in a drum line. So so again, I'm looking forward to watching it and being able to like read along with the subtitles and stuff for it. But yeah, shout out to just kind of the design elements really all coming into concert on this one, and everybody like wanting to make the best possible version of this story that they could. So with that, let us dive into spoiler conversation. I'll kind of let you take lead, I think, on this, Cam, because you're going to be the one that like probably best knows what constitutes spoilers for the story.
Yeah.
And again, obviously we're not going to dive into like future spoilers, but spoilers for this first part of Dune. I guess like the spoiler-ish thing from the beginning is like this one ends with Paul's fight. I don't know if there's like a term for that fight that he has with the guy. I think there is based on what I've seen before, but
yeah, it's like a fight to the death for
honor. Yeah.
Also, so because Paul's mother out like basically beats
Stilgar,
like the leader.
Yeah.
She beats him. He's technically can be challenged for leadership. But technically he's not being challenged for leadership. Jessica is.
Yeah.
And so Paul steps in for Jessica. And what's interesting is before this, Paul has a vision where like this is a guy who's supposed to be his friend and to lead him.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is already Paul counteracting a vision of the future. It goes like there's so much about this that like
well, it also goes back to that line earlier in the film of like, when you have these dreams, are you dreaming things that come to pass? And he's like, not really, or not always, or whatever. And it's like, yep, this is one. Like, because I think it's very fascinating in how the dreams that we see kind of play out shortly before that guy is introduced are him giving a hand and him saying, I will lead you, like I will show you the way. And I still read that as like that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Just not in that friendly sense. And so it's all dreams are up to interpretation and that kind of like that.
And that's super heavy in the next part of Dune. Won't get into future spoilers here, but like that is such a like important part of it is Paul's like when I mentioned earlier in the non-spoiler part, Paul just doesn't understand the weight of like, oh, I'm gonna be the next head of House Atreides. He understands, and like the sanctimonious mother or whatever her name is, the truth speaker,
mm-hmm.
The truth sayer of the emperor who comes to test him, because they like the Benedict Gesserit discover that Jessica's been training him in the way of the voice and
yes.
the way that they're doing that, and so they have to test him to make sure that like he's the heir of one of the most powerful houses. Like he has to be tested to see whether or not he is somebody who will use the voice inappropriately.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very that's such an awesome kick-ass scene for so many different reasons. Paul, being triumphant over, fear is the mind killer. That entire idea of like fear and pain and overcoming that to essentially do that. Now, what's interesting to note is that there's a little bit of a departure from the source material because in the movie it's implied that Paul's mother gave birth to a son in order to try to create essentially the messianic figure of their order.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually not accurate in the source material because in the source material she is supposed to give birth to a daughter to marry the nephew of House Harkonnen in order to unite those houses to then continue on the grand scheme of eventually getting the savior figure. Paul being born a boy means that there is no unification with House Harkonnen.
I mean, like in the world of Dune, is that something that a woman can just choose the sex of their child?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That is not, I guess, made it like
specifically
the line comes out, but I definitely didn't think that was a thing that like they could just do at will.
This order can't.
Okay.
I got the feeling that there was some kind of like magic involved, that like she's part of this like weird magical order that they have powers, but it's like a order of only women. So then that's why they're like, it just on that scene, I got the implication that like this is a big deal, that like you tampered with not only like you could have had you were supposed to only have like a girl child, but not only do you have a boy, now you're giving him the voice. Like, so I was like, but I kind of took it as that, like that there was just like magic involved, that she probably did something or didn't do something that was supposed to guarantee she got a girl.
So here's the thing, Leto, so in the source material, Jessica and Leto, like, so it's important to note, they're not married. She is what's considered a concubine.
Yeah.
She does not have the legal rights or authorities as Lady of House Atreides. That's why they always call her Lady Jessica. They do that as a formality because she is the only paramour of Duke Leto. But she is not called Duchess. She is not called, like, her, like, and they even make a note of that in the Harkonnen soldiers when they're in the flight craft over the desert. They're like, oh, you know, I've, like, never, like, had a highborn. And somebody makes a derogatory remark saying she's not a highborn, she's a Benedict Gesserit who, like, was, like, just, like, the side piece of the count, essentially. And, like, being derogatory about Paul's mother. Which Paul, like, it's very clear that Paul's very protective of his mother because of this. Because he, like, especially because he knows how much his parents love each other.
Mm-hmm.
Duke Leto, like, and Jessica are in love, and Duke Leto asks for a son. And so for an heir. And she loves him enough to break her order's centuries upon centuries long plan of, like, crafting these perfect bloodlines, and breaks that because she fell in love with Duke Leto. And, like, Duke Leto has that amazing scene. Their intimate scene right before, like, leading up to the end of, like, the fall. They, like, because part one is the fall of House Atreides.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, like, that intimate moment where he says, you know, I asked you for a son, and when you gave me a son, I never questioned anything. And he even says, like, even when you walked in shadows. That's just a very specific line about what the Benedict Gesserit do, which basically means Leto let her have free reign to do her Benedict Gesserit stuff on the side and never questioned her about it ever, which is, you know, massive. But at the same time, like that just tells you about the implicit trust that they have. But what I was talking about in the way Trevor, like, warned me about spoilers is because there is that moment where it's he's like, I don't want to take a medication to go to sleep. Like, and she goes, okay. And so she like, just, like, gives him a head massage in her lap. And, like, he looks up at her and he whispers, and it's so fleeting. It's so quick. It's so easy to miss. But he looks up at her and he like, with a little bit of a sadness to him, he looks up at her and says, I should have married you. And it's like, that's somebody who understands the context of, like, what marriage is. Basically, like, he could have married her. It just would not have been in the best, like, there's a whole lot of, like, social ramifications. And he's basically saying, like, I should have said fuck all these ramifications. Like, if I knew this is where we were going to end up anyway on Arrakis, being basically, like, set up to fail by the set up to fail by the Emperor, sacrificed to House Harkonnen. Like, all this, if I had known all of this was going to happen, like, I just would have married you. He's like, I just should have married you. Like that's such a, and for that to be, like, their final interaction, like, is heartbreaking because, like, it's that poignant and it's that sad, and like, I fucking love it. Like, I love that. Like, Oscar Isaac as Duke Leto is the perfect casting. He's amazing. Apparently him and Timothée Chalamet became, like, extremely close when they were in production of this. And, like, you know, it's funny because, like, Oscar Isaac's barely old enough, like, kind of not even old enough to be like just shy of being old enough to be Timothée Chalamet's dad.
Yeah, I mean, like Jessica's like only 12 years older than Rebecca Ferguson is only 12 years older than Timothy Chalamet, despite playing his mother.
Yeah, and I think Oscar Isaac's only like maybe 15
Yeah.
years older than Timothée Chalamet. But they did such an amazing job because Timothée Chalamet's so young looking. He's so like he has that like young man just out of puberty look to him still. And then you have Oscar Isaac who with that immaculately sculpted beard, just so perfect. Like that beard is its own character. And like dude, like the just acting top to bottom is phenomenal. But I think like this movie does so well is it's like we're not going to do exposition because the characters are what's going to drive this story. It's what's happening to these characters, and we're going to take the time for you to get to know these characters, to care about them. You care about the Doctor's relationship with Paul and the House Atreides, and so like when he betrays them, like, you know, it's like wait, this dude? What? Why? And then it's like, and then he goes, like, he looks at, you know, Duke Leto and says, like, I'm like, and you can just see like he's like tragically feels awful about what he's doing, and then he's like, I'm gonna replace your tooth. I'm gonna do that. That's his own machinations to do this, is to do that. And he's like, I'm gonna replace your tooth so like you still have a way to go out on your own terms and also take out your enemies with you. And then on top of that, he takes the House Atreides ring and says, I will do everything I can for Paul. Like, even though I am in this position where I'm betraying you, you know, like, you can tell, like, these men have known each other for years. And this is a brutal betrayal for these two characters to, like, witness and deal with. In a way that is just, like, so phenomenal. And, like, it's just, like, even that level of things. With, the head of their guard. Captain of their security forces. Well, like, I'm here to give my
Gurney?
resignation.
Oh,
not Gurney.
No,
yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm here to give my resignation. And he goes, I'm not having you. Yeah, I'm not having you resign. Like you, like after you've served my family for years. He goes, well, honor demands it. He goes, if you're looking for absolution, earn it. Like, so good. Duke Leto's such a great, phenomenal character. I said I would mention, I was like, the spice collector scene could have easily been skipped over, but Trevor pointed out beautifully yesterday when we were leaving the theater, like, that shows the kind of man that Duke Leto is. Yeah. That he has them abandon. Like, what is this thing that he, like, one of their only spice collectors they have that works? And they're now way behind schedule, and they're in, like, deep shit, but he did it to save men and save lives, and, like, that mattered more to him than the spice. And it's like, fuck, like, it's so fucking good. Mm-hmm. It's so fucking good on so many levels, and it sets it up because you're supposed to care about House Atreides, and you do. They're successful in that, at least from my perspective.
I mean, like, that sequence actually has, like, even more than, like, yes, like, I mean, the immediate thing that I think of is, like, it sets up how, like, the kind of man Duke Leto is. But it's also, it reinforces that the Harkonnens left them with nothing. And if they're trying to convince, like, the Empire's person there, that, like, hey, we need more time or we need more help. Like, it's reinforcing that like the equipment they left us with is clearly crap. It also serves as the audience's first introduction to the real devastation that the sandworms can do. Like, obviously they're, you know, a presence and one of the best known things about Dune outside of, you know, this movie. But like, as their introduction in universe in this film, like it's like, oh, they're so mammoth, they can take out this entire structure in like one fell swoop. So like, it's indicative almost of like, almost every scene is doing double or triple duty to introduce a character moment or a plot moment or like the wider world or like helping the audience along. And yeah, like any of those could be skipped over, but then you're going to miss out on other things, or you're going to have to do some of that legwork elsewhere. So I don't like,
yeah,
there's very much like a feeling of, I don't think there is a wasted moment in this movie. it's going to be slower than people are expecting, or people have kind of grown accustomed to in, you know, the era. But if you can sit through 4 hours of a Zack Snyder Justice League, you can definitely sit through the 2.5 hours of part one of Dune, because I think it's doing things infinitely better.
For sure.
As a result.
I also want to say, like, that moment when the judge of the Emperor, like the judge of change, looks at him and says, like, the Emperor has ordered that I say nothing and see nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that moment of, like, Duke Leto's just, like, looking at her, his face just, like, falls. And it's just like that realization that he has, like, we are so fucked.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, and that leads into him, like, him having those conversations with Jessica of, like, like, I thought we'd have more time. Like, he knows that they've been sent here to die. And that, like, the Emperor is basically trying to kill two birds with one stone. Like, the Harkonnens are way too rich and they're too wealthy, so they need to be put down. And the House Atreides is too powerful and too strong and too beloved, maybe, so they need to be put down. So I'm going to pit my enemies against each other, and I'm going to tip the scales by sending my, you know, my elite troops alongside to kind of, like, make sure what happens needs to happen. So yeah, like, and that's like, for a character that's not even in this movie, the Emperor is very, like, oh, fuck that guy. I hope we get to see Paul take him out at some point, or whatever. It's very much that kind of immediate feeling, because we do care about these characters, and we've seen the devastation that this Emperor's insecurity, and, you know, just in general storytelling, we know that emperors of an entire universe typically not the best guys. So,
nope. What do you know? Emperors who are the heads of imperialism, not good.
Yeah.
No, I loved.
Where have we seen that again before?
I love how the Truthsayer, when she goes to visit House Harkonnen, and they're like, "So you're here?" Like, and she goes, "The Emperor is a petty and jealous man." Like, and is going to help you because he's a jealous, like, it's like, it's not just they're too beloved. Like, Duke Leto says in that scene at the graveyard, says, like, the other houses of the Empire look to House Atreides for leadership. And and Paul goes, yeah, and he goes, the Emperor's afraid of that. Mm-hmm. Like, we are the leaders of the noble houses, not the Emperor. But because we swear fealty and loyalty to the Emperor, and that is unbroken by our house, by our lineage, we have been able to do that. And he goes, that is changing. Like, the Emperor is so afraid of how, basically, like, the only thing keeping the Emperor in place at this point is House Atreides' loyalty to them. And the Emperor is very aware that if Duke Leto was a lesser man, he would have already usurped the throne. But he's so paranoid and afraid of that, he's, like, letting this happen. Like, he's not just letting it happen, he's supporting it, and he's making sure that it happens. And it's, like, it's great. Like, I fucking love that, because that's politically sound. Yeah, like, if you have as the person, as who I am as a person, I would love a House Atreides being loyal to me. I would reward them. I would be like, I love you guys so much, like, be my BFF forever. But that's not the political mind. That's my heart of like, I love people who, like, I love being loyal to people who are loyal to me as a person.
But as a paranoid emperor who feels any potential threat to his own power and can see other potential threats kind of, like, lining up, yeah, he's going to do what he can to make sure the cards fall his way.
And it's an emperor of an intergalactic empire, like an interstellar empire. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not just like a country or like a continent, like on our planet. It is planets, entire systems that belong to the Emperor.
Yeah. And
so it is like paranoia on a level untold. And so, like, but it makes political sense. Like, why would you keep a political ally who's more powerful than you if you're the Emperor?
Yep.
Like, everything makes sense. But it's just like, you have House Atreides, and they are the people that you want to root for, because Duke Leto is played by Oscar Isaac, is just, like, let's be real, hot dad to the extreme. Like, Like, you want to see this hot dad and this hot mom and the hot son all be like do hot, cool things for the rest of their lives, but it ain't gonna happen that way.
The hot BFF, Jason Momoa,
hot old man, Josh Brolin,
yeah,
hot like mysterious doctor. Everybody's so hot in this movie. Let's just be real. Everybody's fucking hot in this movie.
Except Stellan Skarsgård.
Yeah, Stellan Skarsgård is the only one. Oh, can we talk about Stellan Skarsgård for a moment?
Sure.
Like, what an amazing take on this fat character and how he moves around with this like spine thing that like levitates him and he can like just move around like that. And it's just like, and like I forgot who I was talking to, but it was the line delivery when I think I was at the beginning of when we were talking about Dune, when I said like that line, like the scene between the two of them when he says like our families have been at each other for centuries. Like, yeah, if you have my understanding and context, I know like a lot more detail about that. But that line delivery when he says, and then I specifically kept the spoiler out of it when he looks at him and says, "Your concubine is dead. Your son is dead. Your bloodline is over."
Even the and
you see like the single tear fall down Duke Leto's face, and it's like,
yeah, because he's still paralyzed and all that stuff. Even the line in there, and I saw this in like one of the trivia things, so it's a little bit of extra digging, but it's, as I understand, it's context that's introduced in the book. But he refers to Duke Leto's cousin because Jessica is basically his daughter through like rape, right? So like there's already a familial connection between these two warring and rival houses, but it's not,
that's several generations deep. This is not like Paul being born a boy when he should have been a girl and marrying to like settle the disputes between House Harkonnen and House Atreides.
Yeah.
That's not the first time that they've intermarried.
Yeah.
They have a long history of trying to settle things through like marriage and like familial obligation that always goes out the fucking window a couple generations later. Like they are too powerful of houses, and they are two at different points in time have had too ambitious of leaders to actually settle into a real peace between the two of them. And especially for like the last 80 years where House Harkonnen has gained vast, enormous wealth as being in charge of Dune, being in charge of the spice trade. It's been a whole other thing. So like there's a lot to it. Like, and he even says like in the books, it's like cousin. Yeah. I don't know if it's Jessica's like his daughter through rape, or if there's something going on with that, but she is a Benedict Gesserit. She is there's a whole lot within like the familial interactions. For example, the Emperor is a cousin to Duke Leto. Like there is a deep incestual nature to the relationships between the noble families. So yeah.
Frank, I want to give you a chance to jump in here. Anything now that we're in the spoiler filled section, in particular that you wanted to kind of speak to, or any key plot points that jumped out as a surprise, or as a in any kind of vein like that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what we kind of already said already. And one thing that I did like a lot about it is actually a lot of the action sequences that are there, because it is such a slow movie. But I felt like whenever there are some really good action scenes, and I liked a lot of the actual action scenes when they are there, especially the fight at the end. Like, I thought that was actually a really awesome kind of way to build to. And then I like the actual fight, and I like the build up to it in the beginning, where he's even kind of having that other vision. He's kind of thinking ahead, but like he loses and he dies, but then so he still has to like go out there and still face this, and he ends up winning. And so I like that all is the way it's set up and the way they actually carry it out. But then one thing that I felt like too, I don't know if you guys felt this, but obviously it's because it's just part one, then the movie just kind of like ends. Like, obviously they're going off onto and they're like, oh, you're going to go get these like desert powers now. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But I'm like, not only do I want more, obviously that left me somewhat like unfulfilled, where it's like you go through this whole like grand adventure. I got all attached to these people. And then it's like, okay, cool. We're just going to stop reading. Like, if this metaphorically was a book, like it's based off of, it's like, we're just going to stop on this page right here. And maybe in a couple years, we'll come back to this and finish reading. And I'm just like, okay, like I really just want like more, and I want that conclusion. But so that's why I definitely hope we get that.
Yeah, Cameron and I talked about that a little bit yesterday, and the immediate comparison we started talking about was Fellowship of the Ring, and it's like, oh yeah, if Two Towers and Return of the King never got made or something like that. And the more direct comparison that we kind of leaned into was like Deathly Hallows, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, because that was really one of the first instances in the modern era we had of like a book being split into two different movies. That because like Fellowship of the Ring is at least a self-contained book and has kind of the rise and fall of the Fellowship as kind of its center premise. Um, and this, yeah, it is unfortunate that like that because it's such a big story and Denis Villeneuve wants to tell it in such detail that he couldn't do it in one movie. And he went in knowing he couldn't do it in one movie. That it is unfortunate that it's like you have to kind of pick a point in that story to like, here's where we're going to have the story end. And going back into that, like the Fellowship of the Ring, I'm okay with it because I look at it as it is a twofold story. One, it is the fall of House Atreides. So it's what the other comparison I drew with Cameron was, it's basically like A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back sandwiched into one, and then part 2 is going to be the Return of the Jedi and everybody kind of coming back from this. But it's the fall of House Atreides as well as the rise of Paul. It is Paul, like his journey to accept maybe the potential that he is this like mythical, the one kind of the Kwisatz Haderach or whatever that term is.
The Neo, as
exactly,
it's
the
called.
Neo, yeah, the Neo, the Jesus, the messianic figure. And it's him having that pivotal like it's almost like he's becoming Batman a little bit, but like with reverse Batman rules where like he as a warrior he has to get that first kill, and that's like that serves as a nice like I don't think it is, I think it is very pointed that we hear Jessica say like he's never fought to the death before, he's never killed a man before, right before we see that he does what has to be done in that moment. And again, going off of the like this weird parallel of like we had just seen him having visions with this guy in a very friendly manner and like let me show you the way kind of like tone. I love that it subverts almost what we were expecting in that regard. Rewatching the movie a little bit on HBO Max so far, I haven't rewatched the whole thing, but like him having those visions of Duncan Idaho at the beginning, and him like he misinterprets what those visions are. He sees Duncan Idaho with the Fremen, and then he sees him dead. Doesn't realize that that it's not the Fremen who killed him and all that kind of stuff. Like and he even thinks like, if only I'd been there with you. He is there with him, and and Duncan Idaho gives up his life to help him continue on that journey. So I think there's like even across there, like we're still getting the sense of Paul having to figure out what these dreams mean and what these visions mean. And I mean, like, obviously there's also the one of Chani like stabbing him, and what's that gonna like, how is that going to play out in the reality of the situation? Is it just that she gave him that dagger and we can put it to bed, or is that going to be something that gets a thread that continues to get picked up on and stuff? So like I love that as like, yes, it is the first part of a larger story, but I like that I think Villeneuve did a good way in picking where this story ends, not knowing where it's going to go myself. But I think it does tell a good self-enclosed story of Paul's journey in this, while also being like, yes, please give us money, WB, for a follow-up, because we really want to tell the rest of Paul's story. Frank, you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, I just because while we're on that kind of scene in that fight, one thing I also did like about him actually fighting in that scene is like obviously it like kind of shows that he is actually a pretty good fighter. He's been trained from House Atreides, but it also looks like he does like the same move that I think Jason Momoa does, where he like dives out of the way and backstabs him. So I thought that's cool, where it's almost like it's like they all have that kind of similar training and fighting style, and he can even be kind of almost that continuation of like Jason Momoa's character, who was this like super badass who I wish we almost got more of. But that's why I kind of like that, like you get to see some of those things that I know you didn't even see it, but like he could have picked that up from him, or he could have been taught that by like Jeff Bridges or whatever. Like there's so much there, but I was like, I just like him.
Josh Brolin.
Josh Brolin,
Jeff
sorry,
Bridges.
yeah. They're always super interchangeable in my head, like with the names.
That's fair. They are both JBs.
I did want to say, to that point actually, Frank, at the beginning of the movie when Josh Brolin's character comes in to do the training with Paul, Paul he says like with Duncan going to Arrakis, it falls to me to like continue your training.
Yeah.
And
Jason
even
Momoa was his like previous trainer.
Yeah, that's why they're so close. Josh Brolin even says like, and despite the fact like I'm not half the warrior he is, like I will do my best to like, I'll do my best to make up for it. Well, like we all have to like pick up the slack that those who have left us to handle. And then you get the sense that Josh Brolin's character, like Jason Momoa's character, was like a very effective and skilled trainer, but also was a little more lenient with Paul. Because Paul's like, I'm tired, like, I'm not in the mood for this. And Josh Brolin's Gurney's just like, motherfucker, you said what? Like,
throws the knife, yeah.
Yeah, just like,
and even that's
so good.
What that's like, because I think I think there is a reference there to either the book and or the original movie. Because in the movie, that character Gurney is played by Patrick Stewart, right? And Paul has a line of like, instead of doing this, can you just sing me a song? And I believe Patrick Stewart sings a song in the original Dune. So it's a little tongue in cheek reference to that, I think, as well.
That kind of thing also got me when Oscar Isaac was like, I wanted to be a pilot, and I was like, ha.
Yeah. Yeah, I very much enjoyed that as well.
That scene is so beautiful because Paul looks at his dad and goes, "What? You've never mentioned that before?" And he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to visit, like I wanted to see the universe. Like I didn't want to be leader of House Atreides. Like I didn't want this, but like I found my way to it eventually." And he goes, "Maybe Arrakis is where you find your way to it." Deep foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great scene, though, especially just between like a father and his son, and especially even the fact that he's like, all I've ever needed you to be is like my son. So if that's all you are, that's like fine. I was like, I just thought that was like a really great scene. And on it, and like Cam already said, I think we all agree on like the acting in this movie is incredible, especially Oscar Isaac. So I was like, yeah, that scene I thought was really awesome.
Yeah. That was very much a moment. And again, in rewatching it so far, I look at that scene, I'm like, yes, please give us more, because like I don't think this is a direct like pushback on like toxic masculinity in movies and stuff, but it definitely like is a better representation of like a father and son dynamic than 90% of what we see out there. And so yeah, I very much love that, like the compassion that the Duke kind of like shows in that moment to his son who is having these doubts, and like that empathy of like, I've been where you were. I didn't want this either. I'd like, but when like what the whole line of like, greatness, a great man, does not seek action, but or does not seek leadership, but like, answers the call when it is thrust upon him, like that. I mean, it's very much like that's like basically like a paraphrase of a famous Twelfth Night line, I think, from Shakespeare.
Which in itself is answering the call is a step in the hero's journey. For Joseph Campbell. Yeah. On top of that, there is so much meta reference to like Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces in this movie, and it's like it's setting it up for later deconstruction. It's so fucking good, man. Yeah, it's so good. This movie's so great.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing I did want to give a shout out to. I like when Jason Momoa's character Duncan takes the like the helicopter flyer glider kind of thing from the with like during the fight,
Mhm.
because he drops in and he totally murders those like 3 or 4 dudes, and then he starts like banging this like the swords together, and the other guys just walk away.
Yeah, they're like,
They're totally just like
fuck this, we're out. Yeah.
Oh
And
shit,
I
it's
was
Duncan,
like,
Idaho. We're out. Nope.
Yeah. Yeah.
so I was like, it's a small thing. Then there's a lot of small things in this movie I liked, but that was one thing I really liked. Where I'm like, man, he didn't even have to fight though. He just intimidated the shit out of them, and they ran away, and he stole the chopper and got out of there.
Yeah.
Also, a massive shout out to the ship design.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In this like architecture, ship design, just everything that they do in this. Like a lot of this stuff is taken from like the source material itself, but to see the dragonfly ships become like brought to life in this way was like one of the coolest moments of like being a Dune fan.
Mhm.
Of seeing like the way that they are, how awesome they are when Paul's piloting it, and like one of the wings doesn't work, and like just figuring that out and like going with it, and like just so good on so many levels. Just goddamn, I love it. And also like sign language between Paul and his mom,
Mhm.
perfect.
Yeah.
Like just like that one's deaf. Like the one with the scar is deaf.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, she tried to use the voice on him and it didn't work. They sent the deaf guy in to handle Jessica because of that. It's so damn good.
Yeah. I also want to shout out Sharon Duncan Brewster playing Dr. Kynes, because I would not have
She's
known
awesome.
this otherwise, but Dr. Kynes in the book is a male character.
Mhm.
And that was a deliberate gender swap choice that Denis Villeneuve makes. And I loved her. Like, I mean, yeah, she is kind of the, like, the emperor has told me to see and say nothing and that kind of stuff. But she's converted. She sees Paul and the potential that Paul has, and basically like gives up her life for them in a badass way of like, I'm taking you guys down with me. Like, I love that. Like, I love that before she's stabbed, like, we immediately can see like, oh, she's gonna fucking ride the sandworm. Like, she's
Mhm.
calling the sandworm to like ride the sandworm. That's a thing they do. I'm super excited for that. And then like we get robbed of that because they kill her, but she like pivots and still uses the fact that the sandworms is coming to take out those those warriors as well. And then we still later on get to see somebody riding the sandworm being like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's gonna be something that Paul undoubtedly learns how to do, and he's gonna ride a sandworm into battle or something like that. I can't wait. So give us part 2, absolutely. But yeah, like I think for what that character could be and how easily that character could be dispatched and whatnot, like I think we get to see a lot. Like, we get to see enough of those moments with her that we get to see her journey, it going from like, I'm just doing what the emperor told me to do, to like I mean, the fact that she's there along for that ride of that, the scene we kind of touched on, that is very easily could be a disposable scene. Like, that's part 1 of like her making the change and being like, oh, these guys are different. They're more, they value human life more than the spice. That's a step in the right direction.
He shall know our ways as though he was born to walk in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's just like a quick
the
line.
fact that he already knew how to put on the still suit, even.
Yeah. She's like, oh, you've worn a still suit? She's like, oh, how, you've worn a still suit often? And he went, no, this is my first time. And she goes, fucking excuse me?
Yeah.
And then he goes, and then she got like utters in Fremen, like in the language, like, and he shall know our ways as though he was born to walk in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just like perfect. Just like such a good, it's partly like, yeah, there is a prophecy, but also partly like she's just like throwing that line out there, just be like, as like a this motherfucker
Mm-hmm.
kind of line.
And even it's this again goes into like the more like the one of the few things I know about like the deep lore backstory. It's touched on a little bit there, in the earlier like not Mother Superior, but like the mother of the Reverend Mother scene, when they're doing the test. But like the idea that the Bene Gesserits have gone to these worlds and have like basically been missionaries and spread the story of the coming of a messianic character, like all plays into their plot that they're themselves making, and they're themselves like and so the fact that like that goes back centuries and that they've like set up this prophecy that they one day hope to fulfill, like they've been laying the groundwork for this plan for centuries. And yeah, maybe because of Lady Jessica's actions, it's here a little bit ahead of schedule, but like it's still something that they've been doing for so long that like it's seeped into the Fremen culture and stuff, and it's just kind of like a given that this is out there and that these characters can kind of like react to Paul in that way. Even Stilgar like sees something in him in that first sequence that they have together. Javier Bardem again, like great in
God,
the few little sequences we get with him.
Spit like
Yeah.
swords drawn. Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Like,
you for offering us the gift of the water of your body.
Yeah.
We offer it ours in return.
I even
Which
like
is such a good,
even before that, like before he kind of gives that explanation, like I it's almost like I've just seen enough like desert centric stories to know that that's what's coming, that like spitting, while yes in high society is a, you know, is a looked down upon thing, like in this society where like that's a precious valuable resource that he's just given up to you, that like I see that as a great gift. And so I love that, like, yep, that's exactly where it goes and where they take it.
we already learned that still suits literally take everything about moisture of your body and returns it back into your recycled. So we know spitting your water out is a like, there's the Fremen who are like basically making little cappuccinos in that one scene, and they all take turns spitting on the source thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so good to be like, this is so important to their culture that you like, if you spit, it has to be for a great reason. And I love the aspect of like, yeah, like Javier Bardem just coming in, just like spitting. And then like after Jason Momoa spits, Duke Leto just looks over at him and just like also spits. And then I love how he goes, like, I know that your people have been hunted before. That's not what we're here to do.
Yeah.
I look at your people as like, you know, like he goes, and like, you know, the sands are ours. He goes, you know, well, I'm here. I have a duty to harvest the spice, but your cities are yours. Like they do not belong to me. It's my fiefdom, but they will always be yours. And like, I love that immediate aspect of like Duke Leto just like understands what, like, cause you know, Duncan Idaho has spent weeks with them, understands like, also I love it. He goes, oh yeah, no, there's millions of them.
Yeah.
He goes, there's millions, like, and they say Harkonnen said that like estimated cap
like
was around
50,000 on the entire planet. Yeah.
But there's there's tens of millions of them in all these different little underground cities and tunnels throughout the planet. And it's like, and
desert power.
Yeah. Desert power.
It's like it wasn't until like, I think Paul kind of like reinforces at the end that like I realized like, oh, like they're looking for desert power in manpower to take on the Empire. Like that, like it just didn't, because the Duke kind of sets up that he's not gunning for the Emperor's power. Like they're fine to, like, I didn't see that as a potential, like that's why he's trying to make peace with these people. Like but it really is like, he's not going there for the spice, and he could care less about the spice. He is there. He sent Duncan ahead to like make peace, to be an envoy for the Fremen, because he sees the Fremen, like nobody else has been able to conquer the Fremen, so the Fremen have like incredible value if he can like sway them to their side. I think there's a great story told in that.
Yeah.
Very subtly.
Well, you can't like, you're going to you're going to like attack us now that we've settled in and are successful with Arrakis. Well, we have allies in the Fremen, so like fuck off, basically is the idea. But it's like, I thought we had more time.
Yep.
So good. So good.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up the episode?
One more thing I wanted to give a quick shout out to that's also a small thing that I liked is the palm trees.
Hmm.
That's this kind of scene where there's kind of the explanation where they're kind of set up in the beginning of like why they're there and how much the water and resources they take, but that they're like he's like no, but he's like shall we remove them? And he's like no, these are sacred. These have been here for like forever. And then I like that like at the end when they like attack and it's like the house or the fall of their house, they're just all the trees are on fire.
Yeah.
Like I was like that I thought was like really cool. Like that just the taking the second to like set that up at the beginning made it so cool at the end when they're like marching through and all of them are just burning down and I was like damn
Well,
and
it's
I
also
thought
like, yeah, those trees were originally planted by House Harkonnen.
mm,
Those were Harkonnen trees, and it just shows they don't care.
yeah
Yep.
Like, it just shows everything. And Batista's out there lopping off heads and beating people to death in the light of the fire of these trees, and it's just like I love the imagery of that because like that'll come back later. His character is very minor in this first part, but he's very major in upcoming parts.
Hmm.
Remember when I said that um, Paul was supposed to be a girl and married to the nephew of the Lord of House Harkonnen?
Oh, he's the nephew. Yeah.
He's the nephew.
There you go. Yeah, he repeatedly refers to the Baron as his uncle. Yeah, that
Yep.
makes that
So
makes sense.
like, female Paul was supposed to marry Batista,
that guy.
and how awful would have that been?
Yeah,
I can't wait for Batista bomb Paul through a table.
there you go. Yeah, just on that, like I love the potential that is still left open in these. Obviously, like the Baron used his like floating devices to get to the ceiling, so he's he didn't die, and he's in that like in the healing process, in the healing tar pits or whatever is going on. So like
It's a BAFTA tank, if I understand correctly.
the back to tank. Yeah. So we've got him, and we've still got them as a threat. We've also, again, got the Emperor and the Emperor's part, because what we get the idea that the Emperor has daughters, so no heir to the throne. Paul could make a play for marrying one of those daughters. I don't think we see Gurney eat it, and I feel like we
do not see Gurney eat it.
I feel like that's a tried and true thing of like, well, they could still come back. Obviously, Jason Momoa's character Duncan Idaho not coming back. We see him die a glorious death. But yeah, so I think
taking a sword out of his gut.
Yeah. I think he could have gotten he could have killed a couple other guys if he hadn't done like the battle cry to like get them to turn around first, but whatever. Even that I do want to touch on that a little bit of the combat, because they set up the idea that like the shields protect from like high impact blows, but then like slow stuff does damage.
So it's not slow stuff that does damage. So it's the speed. So the shields activate upon the speed of what's coming at them. So a fast strike will get blocked.
Yeah.
A bullet will get blocked.
Yeah.
An energy blast will get blocked. But like the little hunter thing.
Yeah.
What it does is it's slow. So they can't stop. It's not like it stops powerful stuff. It stops fast stuff. So if you want to make an execution strike, you have to move slow. So Jason Momoa, when he hits them, keeps it there, takes it, and then slowly pushes his sword through.
Yeah, okay.
That's what's going through. So like the idea is these are high impact velocity blocking shields. And so the entire fighting culture around these shields is fast strikes to get your blade in position and then slowly move them so you can go in for the kill.
Yeah, and I guess that's
it's super cool. I love
it. It like sometimes that didn't. I had a hard time seeing that element of it track sometimes.
Sure.
Like because just the momentum of a fight sequence, a lot of times it looked like it's just Jason Momoa stabbing a guy, and it's just a matter of like, are we going to see a blue effect or are we going to see a red effect to know if it like punctured the shield or whatever. And I just like I couldn't quite follow. Whereas if it had been like we see with like the hunter, the little hunter seeker thing of like, we see it hit and then we see it like slowly burrow in to do the damage. Like if it had been we see Momoa's like strike and then like a close-up shot or a zoom in shot of, okay, now that it's there, he just slowly like slices a neck or a body part or something like that. That's
it does do that sometimes though.
I
Like,
mean,
in that,
yeah,
in
I
that,
just,
yeah, in that
it's more, I
quarter
guess,
scene.
for like in his final sequence, like he's taken out a lot of those people like real quick, and I'm like, it feels like the logic of this isn't.
I want to
being
rewatch it. I
held
want to
to.
rewatch it on HBO Max in order to kind of like break down that fight scene to see if it really, because I recall them doing that pretty much for every kill strike.
Mhm.
But I want to go back and rewatch it and kind of like look back over that and be
Yeah.
like, okay, did they do that? Because I remember specifically, like I remember there are specific moments where he does like
there
do
are
a
definitely
slow
a couple where
down.
it's there, and now that it's there, we see it, but it's more just when he's fighting 7 guys at once or something like that. That's
How
where
does it work? Yeah.
that's where I didn't see those a lot. When it's like him one-on-one with somebody, yeah, they gave us those visual cues, but some of those others just like, okay, well, he hit somebody and then like there was a red thing, so presumably that's what's happening. But yeah, it didn't, knowing that was how these things worked helped my brain get there. But there were a couple times where I was like, I feel like that was just like a one shot in, and it seems like the shield should have blocked that or something, but whatever. Still
I do
really
agree
cool
with,
fun sequences. Like regardless, it's just like like if anything, that's more of like a criticism, because I feel like that like it helps and hinders the action for storytelling purposes. Like, okay, they can't just immediately be picked off by guns. Cool, great, love that. But then like it is, how do you do a fight scene that still has people dying because of these things, like effectively and stuff. So I mean, infinitely better than what I've seen as like the big like cubes of CG from the 84 version. But yeah, what were you gonna say, Frank?
I just definitely agree with you there. And like specifically in that scene with Duncan in the hallway, like I think like it doesn't like take away from the movie necessarily, because it's still a cool moment. But I'm totally with you where some of the stuff is like hard to track, and some of the fighting is a bit weird there because of how they've like set it up with the shields, and then it's like I'm kind of just with you where it's like it just seems like some of the things are almost like inconsistent, or even if they are not, even if they are like following all the rules, it's just hard to like tell, especially because it's so quick.
Yeah.
So that's definitely like that's just something I did kind of notice about the hallway scene too, and I'm kind of with you on that. And even just like even some of the actual way it's like filmed can be hard to kind of see what's going on sometimes, because there's just so many bodies in that hallway. Like it's like the opposite of the Captain America like elevator, where like you see everything that happens and it's like this really cool thing. It's like you like I feel like I'm missing things, or I'm like well, I was like, what was that? Like, but it stands out a little bit to me because the rest of the movie is so strong that's like the only time that I really felt like that. So that's why I was like, it's kind of a weirder moment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that sequence more than I think anything feels like an MCU or a DCEU fight sequence, of just like, okay, we're having our one guy take out a ton of bodies, so we're gonna do that for fight choreography in a very efficient manner, but in a like, does it abide by the rules of the universe that are set up? Maybe there's a little fudging there, but yeah, it's definitely something to like, analyze on a rewatch or something like that. But yeah, I mean, so clearly, again, a solid recommendation from all three of us to go check out Dune. Obviously, if you sat through our spoiler-filled conversation around it, hopefully you already did. But and if you did, go watch it again. Let's all do our part to support this and try and get our Dune Part 2. I wonder...
It's the Starship Troopers. It's like, I'm doing my part. I streamed it on HBO Max 3 times this weekend.
There we go. Yeah, I'll boot it up on my phone while I go and play more Final Fantasy 14 or something like that, and I'll just kind of have it playing there in the background. Yeah, definitely great film. Really excited to see more, and I don't see more. Maybe just like do a little bit more research, because I don't know if I'll sit down and like read the books, or definitely
you don't have to.
Definitely not.
I'm gonna be
books,
honest. I was a voracious reader when I was a teenager, where I basically read whatever I could get my hands on.
Yeah.
Especially if it was like sci-fi or fantasy. I would not read that book today.
Yeah, it's definitely one I like. If time passes, the next few weeks pass, and they're like, hey, actually, just there wasn't enough traction. Like, I very much expect that we'll get one of those like any day now announcements of like, hey, because of the popularity of this on, like, because it seems so weird to put so many resources into that and then not not be committed to the part 2.
2 words for you, Trevor. John Carter.
I mean, fair. That is absolutely a fair
That was
comparison
also
there. But that
was also very bad though.
I love John Carter. Fuck everybody. I love John Carter.
I like John Carter, but it had like such a troubled development. I think that's more what hurt John Carter's potential franchise possibility.
And the marketing was shit for it. So
yeah. Well, so we'll see what happens with Dune. But if we don't get a part 2, I'm definitely going to seek out like what was the end of Paul's story in that to see kind of how that all plays out. But I will hold off doing so to keep from spoiling myself otherwise. But yeah. Well, that is gonna do it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining me to talk Dune as well as Far Cry and Back for Blood. Let's go around the table with any plugs we might have. You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to one of our other podcasts at That D Plus Show. We've been doing a Halloween themed month, and the last episode that went up was a fun one about a Halloween Town 2, Calabar's Revenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty light on Calabar if you watched it or listened to the podcast, but it's a fun one. I definitely recommend.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, do you guys want to know the joke that I was very, very excited for you guys to witness?
In Calabar's Revenge? Sure.
Yeah, in Calabar's Revenge. The joke about how there's no spiders on the World Wide Web.
Yep. That was
still one of my favorites.
I feel like, and admittedly, you know, if I had seen it in the context of 2001 when it originally came out, I probably wouldn't have heard it, you know, around as much, but it's definitely one of those, like, I've heard that joke in so many different things that going back in time, I was just like, groan. But I appreciate
so good.
I appreciate
So
that you enjoyed that one there, Cam.
I still enjoy it. 20 years later, still enjoy it.
With the quality of the rest of the movie, that's still really a standout joke of the movie, though.
That's fair, yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Debbie Reynolds making a spider web on the World Wide Web joke. Anyway, good shout out there, Frank. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to, Cameron?
Yeah, you know, I do want to give a massive shout out to, That News You Care About. You guys have been covering some pretty interesting stuff lately. Just this last week, you guys, what was the cover story for this last week again?
We talked about reviews and basically like
that's what it was.
Processes of reviews these days, and you know, the value of reviews, you know, in an era where you've got written reviews, you got video podcasts, conversations like this one about, you know, Dune or Far Cry, Twitch streamers, all that stuff. Like, what is a review in this day and age, and, you know, how does that, you know, match up against what we think of reviews?
Yeah, no, because I know there was a lot of that question going around for a lot of different reasons. A lot of review structures have kind of been in question lately for different sites. Review scores, you know, and like, honestly, the idea of like what a review is, what, like, how it matters, what because there's often monetary stuff on the back end for the studio in regards to reviews, and like in their contracts with their publisher, like there's a lot of stuff that goes into like the review like industrial complex of video games. So, no, I'm really looking forward to like catching up on that one. I'm a week behind on That News You Care About, but I'm really looking forward to that one because of like a lot of the conversation going around that week around was about like how reviews are done.
Yeah, we didn't even dive into the like the developer end of like what reviews mean for
you guys were talking about like the turnaround time that is expected of reviewers.
Because that's kind of what kicked it off. Was there was a I don't remember if it was The Verge or I think it was Washington Post actually, but they did a piece talking about how, like, for Deathloop, you know, I had 3 days to review this, or for Far Cry 6 our reviewer had, you know, 5 days or something like that, and just the amount of crunch that has been passed on to the reviewer to hit embargo times, and those, like, that crunch is not indicative of how people are typically playing these games. So the reviewer isn't giving the like real experience because of how they're forced to play it. for embargo, because yeah, they could play it at their own pace and then miss the embargo, and then nobody ever sees that review because we're all beholden to the almighty algorithms and stuff like that. So yeah, that was kind of the jumping off point for the conversation, was that Washington Post piece. Yeah.
And I remember a lot of different reviewers, like Kat Bailey and from IGN. Like I remember Imran Khan was talking about some stuff. Like a lot of different outlets, people were talking about like the brutal crunch turnaround that they've had on some stuff, like where they only had like maybe 2 days to like get a review out.
Yeah.
And like kind of like how punishing and difficult that was. So
yeah, it was one of the other ones that's brought up in the article is like the recent Nintendo Brawler Smash clone game. They got that like the day before the game came out or whatever, and they had to quickly try and turn around that. So yeah, it's definitely something that is, I think, suffering as a result of like it's the ripple effect of like crunch in the industry and the like but then you do have, like we talked about, the fact that like when Logan got Yakuza Kiwami, he had like a month to like play and review that game. And I touched on like the idea that like I knew people who got Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal had like months to play through and review that game, in large part benefited from the fact that those games had already been done and released in Japan first, and then it was just the localization that needed to be done for the kind of the US release or the Western release. So it's like, okay, so those games are done, and it's just a matter of like, this is when they want to release for their financial reasons or for when they think it's going to fit best in their calendar, versus so many other games, the date is set and then they do their best to try and hit that date. And as we see, every day, games pushing their release dates back, which means that the reviewer is going to get those games. Oh, we also talked about the idea that like, yeah, a reviewer playing that game that has a day one patch and is not playing with that day one patch, that review means nothing. I brought up the idea that like, if you go back and read original reviews of Destiny 2, they are completely like the Red Leviathan like storyline isn't even in Destiny 2 anymore. It's been vaulted. So like those original reviews for Destiny 2 bear no resemblance to the game as it sits today. And how do you handle games as a service type games and those reviews and all that stuff. So yeah, it was a good conversation. Definitely check out That News You Care About as well. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will plug the other thing that we do in terms of our Let's Plays. For the last couple weeks, I sat down and played Life is Strange Before the Storm. To talk about something chasing SEO, obviously. But then also I will plug this week's episode, at least Tuesday, is going to be Psychonauts 2, me playing the first level of Psychonauts 2, which I have since gone through and 100%ed and had a great time with that game. So go check out that on the youtube.com/thatnerdysite this week. Don't know what Thursday is going to be yet. I'll have to figure that out still, but I got a couple days. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff, and maybe even consider supporting us over on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like Plankfan did, who now gets early access to a monthly bonus episode of this very show. This month's episode is me and Jazz sitting down and talking about some of our favorite Halloween memories. But if you don't want to support us, that'll go live to everybody basically next week on Halloween Day, October 31st. And we'll have a new Patreon early access episode. Thank you again for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.